Richard Baxter, Christian Directory, Christian Ethics, Chapter 1, Part 1. Directions to unconverted, graceless sinners for the attaining of true saving grace. If ungodly, miserable sinners were as few as the devil in their self-love would make themselves believe, I might forbear this part of my work as needless. For the whole need not the physician, but the sick. If you go into 20 families and ask them all whether any of them are in an unsanctified state, unrenewed and unpardoned, and under the wrath and curse of God, you will meet with few that will not tell you they hope it's better with them than so, and though they are sinners, as all are, yet that they're repenting, pardoned sinners. Nay, there is scarce one of many of the most wicked and notoriously ungodly, but hope that they're in a penitent, pardoned state. Even the haters of God will say they love him, and the scorners at godliness will say that they are not ungodly, and that it is but hypocrisy and singularity that they deride. And it were well for them if saying so would go for proof, and he that will be their judge would take their words. But God will not be deceived, though foolish men are wise enough to deceive themselves. Wickedness will be wickedness when it has clothed itself with the fairest names. God will condemn it when it has found out the most plausible pretenses and excuses. Though the ungodly think to bear it out in pride and scorn, and think to be saved by their hypocritical lip service, as soon as the most holy worshippers of the Lord, yet shall they be like chaff which the wind driveth away. They shall not be able to stand in judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. Psalm 1, 4-6. And if God know better than foolish men, then certainly the flock is little to whom 32. And wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leads to life, and few there will be that find it. Matthew 7, 13 and 14. When Christ was asked, Lord, are there few that be saved? He answered, Strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in, and shall not be able. Luke 8, 23 and 24. But alas, we need no other information than common experience to tell us whether the greatest part of men be holy, and heavenly, and self-denying, that seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and love God above all, and will forsake all they have for the sake of Christ. And undoubtedly, none but such are saved, as you may see, Hebrews 11, or rather 21:14, Matthew 6:20, 21:33, Luke 14:33. Seeing then the godly are so few, and the ungodly so many, and that God will take nothing for holiness that is not such indeed, and seeing it is so terrible a thing to any man that has his wits about him to live one day in an unconverted state, because he that dieth so is lost forever, methinks it should be our wisdom to be suspicious of ourselves, and careful in so great a business, and diligent in searching and examining our hearts, whether they are truly sanctified. It can be no harm to make sure work for our salvation, whereas presumption, carelessness, and negligence may betray us to remediless misery and despair. I do not here suppose the reader to have any such acquaintance with his heart, or care of his salvation, or obedient willingness to be taught and ruled by Jesus Christ, as is proper to those that are truly sanctified. For it is ungodly persons that now I am speaking to. And yet, if I should not suppose them to have some capacity and disposition to make use of the directions which I give them, I might as well pass them by and spare my labor. I tell you therefore, reader, what it is that I presuppose in you, and expect from you, and I think you will not judge me unreasonable in my suppositions and expectations. 1. Presuppose that you are a man. I suppose thee to be a man, and therefore that thou hast reason and natural free will, that is, the natural faculty of choosing and refusing, which should keep your sensitive appetite in obedience, and that you are capable of loving and serving your Creator and enjoying him in everlasting life. 2. I suppose that you know yourself to be a man, therefore that your sensitive part or flesh should no more rule you or be ungoverned by you than the horse should rule the rider or be unruled by him, and that you understand that you are made on purpose to love and serve your Maker, and to be happy in his love and glory forever. If you know not this much, you know not that you are a man, or else know not what a man is. 3. I suppose you to have a natural self-love and a desire of your own preservation and happiness, and that you have no desire to be miserable, or to be hated of God, or to be cast out of his favor and presence into hell, and there to be tormented with devils everlastingly. Yea, I will suppose that you are not indifferent whether you dwell in heaven or hell, in joy or torment, but would fain be saved and be happy. Whether you be godly or ungodly, wise or foolish, I will be bold to take all this for granted. And I hope, in all this, I do not wrong you. I suppose you to be one that knows that you did not make yourself, nor give yourself that power or wisdom which you have, and that he that made you and all the world must needs be before all the world, and that he that is eternal, having no beginning, For if ever there had been a time when there was nothing, there never would have been anything, because nothing can make nothing. And I suppose that you confess that all the power and wisdom and goodness of the whole creation set together is less than the power and wisdom and goodness of the Creator, because nothing can give more than it has to give. I suppose, therefore, that you do confess that there is a God. For to be the eternal, infinite being, and the most powerful, wise, and good, and the first cause of all created being, and power, and wisdom, and goodness, this, with the subsequent relations to the creature, is to be God. If you will deny that there is a God, you must deny that you are a man, and that there is any man, or any being. 5. I suppose that you know that God, who gave a being unto all things, is by this title of creation the absolute owner or lord of all, and that he that made the reasonable creatures with natures to be governed in order to a further end, is by that title the supreme governor, and therefore has his laws commanding duty, and promising reward, and threatening punishment, and therefore will judge men according to these laws, and will be just in judgment, and in his rewards and punishment. And that he that freely gave the creature its being and all the good it has, and must give it all that ever it shall have, is the Father or most bountiful benefactor to his creatures. Surely I screw thee not too high in supposing you to know all this, for all this is no more than that there is a God. For he is not God if he be not the Creator, and therefore our owner, our ruler and benefactor, our absolute Lord, our most righteous governor, and our most loving Father or benefactor. 6. I suppose, therefore, that you are convinced that God must be absolutely submitted to and obeyed before all others in the world, and loved above all friends or pleasures or creatures whatsoever. For to say he is my owner is to say I must yield myself to him as his own. To say I take him for my supreme governor is to say that I will absolutely be ruled by him. And to say I take him as my dearest father or chief benefactor is to say that I am obliged to give him my dearest love and highest thanks. Otherwise you do but jest, or say you know not what, or contradict yourselves, while you say he is your God. 7. I suppose that you are easily convinced that in all the world there is no creature that can show so full a title to you as God, or that has so great authority to govern you, or that can be so good to you, or do so much for you, as God can do, or has done, and will do, if you do your part, and therefore that there is nothing to be preferred before him, or compared with him, in our obedience or love, nor is there any that can save us from his justice, if we stand out against him. 8. I suppose that as you know, God is just in his laws and judgments, so that he is so faithful that he will not, and so all-sufficient that he need not, deceive mankind, and govern them by mere deceit. This better beseems the devil than God. And therefore, that as he governs man on earth by the hopes and fears of another life, he doesn't delude them into such hopes and fears. And as he does not procure obedience by any rewards or punishments in this life, as the principal means, the wicked prospering, and the best being persecuted and afflicted here, therefore his rewards or punishments must needs be principally here in life to come. For if he have no rewards or punishments, he has no judgment. And if he has no judgment, he has no laws, or else no justice. And if he has no laws or no justice, he is no governor of man, or not a righteous governor. And if he be not our governor and just, he is not our God. And if he were not our God, we had never been his creatures, nor had a being, or been men. 9. I suppose that you know that if God had not discovered what he would do with us in the life to come, yet man is highest bound to obey and love his Maker, because he is our absolute Lord, our highest ruler, and our chief benefactor, and all that we are to have is from him. And that if man be bound to spend his life in the service of his God, it is certain that he shall be no loser by him, no, not by the costliest obedience that we can perform. For God cannot appoint us anything that is vain, nor can he be worse to us than an honest man, that will see that we lose not by his service. Therefore, that God, for whom we must spend and forsake this life and all these pleasures which sensualists enjoy, has certainly some greater thing to give us in another life. 10. I may take it for granted at the worst that neither thyself nor any infidel in the world can say that you are sure that there is not another life for man, in which his present obedience shall be rewarded and disobedience punished. The worst that ever infidel could say was that he thinks there is no other life. None of you dare deny the possibility of it, nor can with any reason deny the probability. Well then, let this be remembered, while we proceed a little further with you. 11. I suppose, alas, what is time? How quickly gone, and then it is nothing. And all things, then, are nothing which are passed with it. So that the joys or sorrows of so short a life, or nobility of an endless happiness, should be infinitely preferred before such transitory vanity, even the greatest matters that can be expected here, and that the probability or possibility of hell should engage us with far greater care and diligence to avoid it, than is due for the avoiding anything that you can think to escape by sinning, or any of the sufferings of this momentary life. If you see not this, you've lost your reason. that the mere probability or possibility of a heaven and hell should much more command our care and diligence than the fading vanities of this dreaming, transitory life. Thought thus far in the clearest light, holy life is every man's duty, not only as they owe it to God as their Creator, their owner, governor, and benefactor, but also because, as lovers of ourselves, our reason commands us to have 10,000-fold more regard of a probable or possible joy and torment which are endless, than of any that are small and of short continuance. And if this be so, that holy life is every man's duty with respect to the life that is to come, then it is most evident that there is such a life to come indeed, that it is more probable or possible, even certain. For if it be but man's duty to manage this life by the hopes and fears of another life, then it must follow that either there is such a life to come, or else God hath made it man's duty to hope and fear and care and labor and live in vain, and that he himself does tantalize and cheat his creatures, and rule the world by motives of deceit, and make religion and obedience to our Maker to be a life of folly, delusion, and our loss. And he that believes this of God, though I mentioned this argument in another treatise, I think it not unmeet here to repeat it for your benefit. 13. And seeing I suppose you to be convinced of the life to come, and that man's happiness and misery is there, I must needs suppose that you do confess that all things in this life, whether prosperity or adversity, honor or dishonor, are to be esteemed and used as they refer to the life to come. For nothing is more plain than that the means are to have all their esteem and use in order to their end. That only is good in this life which tends to the happiness of our endless life, and that is evil indeed in this life that tends to our endless hurt, and to deprive us of the everlasting good. And therefore no price or motive should hire us to sin against God, and to forfeit or hinder our endless happiness. 14. I may suppose, if you have reason, that you will confess that God cannot be too much loved, nor obeyed too exactly, nor served too diligently, especially by such backward sinners that have scarce any mind to love or worship him at all, and that no man can make too sure of heaven, or pay too dear for it, or do too much for his salvation, if it be but that which God has appointed him to do, and that which you have nothing else, that is so much worth your time and love and care and labor. And therefore, though you have need to be stopped in your love and care and labor for the world, because for you may easily pay too dear and do too much, yet there is no need of stopping men in their love and care for God and their salvation, which is worth more than ever we can do, and where the best are apt to do too little. 15. I also suppose you to be one that knows that this puts us on trial, to prepare for the life that shall come after, and that as men live here they shall speed forever, and that time cannot be recalled when it is gone, and therefore that we should make the best of it while we have it. 16. I suppose you also to be easily convinced that seeing man has his reason in life for matters of everlasting consequence, his thoughts of them should be frequent and very serious, and reason possess in the matters which their minds are turned from. 18. Yes, one thing more I think I may suppose, in all or most that will read this book, that you take on you that my work is in a manner done before I begin it. But if you do it but opinionatively and ineffectually, yet God and man may plead with you the truths which you profess. Having told you what I presuppose in you, I proceed now to the directions. But I again entreat and charge you, reader, as you love your soul, and would not be condemned for hypocrisy and sloth, that you do not refuse to put in practice what is taught you, and show thereby that whatever you pretend, you are not willing to do your part for your own salvation. No, not in the most reasonable, necessary things.